Welcome to Suitcase Stories, Voices of the Guild. At the Guild for Human Services, our students and adults with intellectual disabilities are served by more than 500 staff members who come from 24 different nations of origin. Since last year, we've had staff members participating in workshops with the International Institute of New England to help them share and celebrate their experiences with immigration. As you all know, international migration affects everyone, whether you are a newcomer to the United States, a relative, a friend, or a colleague of immigrants. Tonight, you are going to hear stories from several Guild staff members about their experiences as an immigrant. You will hear about their challenges navigating unfamiliar places and learning the cultural lenses and norms of this country, all while trying not to lose the culture they grew up in as they persist to achieve their dreams and goals. My name is Mustafa Abdullahi, and I'm the Director of Adult Residential Services here at the Guild. I'm an immigrant myself from Ghana. How we view and understand diverse backgrounds is profoundly influenced by the stories we hear, as well as our own interactions with people from around the world. It is easier to have your own bias and prejudice and categorize someone to an already defined box without hearing their side of the story. I say thank you. Thank you again for joining us tonight for Suitcase Stories, Voices of the Guild.
It's 2002. I'm 23 years old, and it's my first time in New York. I'm here because of an exchange program, and before I can go into my exchange program, I need to go for orientation at Wagner College. And a few things I remember here at Wagner College is they taught us that, one, you have to look the American in the eye. Two, you can engage in small talk, and it was actually encouraged. Three, is that you have to be on time. Now, this point was really, really emphasized. So during my orientation, when a stranger approached me and asked, "Are you new?" I turned and I answered that I was. And from there, we had a conversation for about 15 minutes. And after, she gave me a phone number. She said I would call her if I ever needed anything. I said I would. But after that, I really didn't think much about our offer, because in a couple of days, I left Wagner to go upstate New York to work at a summer camp for people with disabilities. And there, it was great experiences for the whole summer. Well, until I had a dilemma. At the end of the summer, I needed to make a choice of either going back immediately to Zambia or experience America for about 3 months as allowed under the program. So I remembered that offer, and I called her, and she picked up the phone, and I told her about my dilemma. And then she said, "It's okay, you can come to New York, and I'll find you somewhere to stay." She gave me her address, and I was gonna see her on a Friday, 5 p.m. Now, a few days after, I actually had a problem. I learned that the free buses from the camp to New York were gonna leave on a Wednesday. I thought of calling her, but I really didn't wanna call her because I remembered that the appointment was 5 p.m. and they really had to emphasize at orientation that you have to be on time. So I figured I'll find something else to do when I get to New York for those days. And come Wednesday, I left on the free bus because going on a Friday to me, I couldn't have done it. I didn't know where I was going. I had very little money, and going that Wednesday was just my best choice. So I arrived in Manhattan, and we amazed by people and the crowds and the cars and the buildings and the billboards. And with the buildings and the billboards, if you have to really check them out, you have to be looking up. So I was doing that. Now, if you're walking and looking up, sooner or later, there's gonna be a disaster. So I kept on bumping into people. I would keep on walking when everybody else had stopped. It was bad. And by nightfall, I knew I wasn't gonna get a hotel. I had little money on me, but I had a plan. See, I'd seen an internet cafe that advertised that from midnight to 6 in the morning, you pay $1 per hour. So I was gonna pay $6, stay there from midnight to 6 in the morning. I could surf the web, but hopefully I could catch a nap too. But by now, it's not yet midnight. So I'm still walking, and I'm hungry, and I'm tired, and I had to buy a hot dog and a soda. So next to the vendor, there was this 3-foot wall that I sat on. And when I sat there eating my hot dog and soda, I was wondering where everybody else was going. And eventually I put my bag down and lay my head there just to rest a little bit, and then I fell asleep. And as the sounds of people and cars increased, I woke up and it was morning. First I checked myself to make sure I was okay. Then I checked to see where my bags were. And my bag was there, and my suitcase was there. And then as I doing that, I look up on the side and it says Central Park. Now, who sleeps in Central Park, you may ask? I'll tell you, it's a guy who doesn't know he's sleeping in Central Park. But two, it's that I did not know how dangerous Central Park was at the time. So quickly, I gathered my bags and I planned to go to Staten Island for the day, and so that I can find this woman's address before I could get there Friday. I really didn't want to get lost that Friday. Now, I got to Staten Island, and I started looking for her address, and I kept on getting lost. I would double down on the buses, take the same bus twice, 3 times, and the bus drivers eventually stopped charging me. And by nightfall, I still hadn't found her address. And I asked the bus driver if they can drop me off at the nearest YMCA, because I remembered at camp that the YMCA had hostels that they didn't charge much money. So that was my plan. And when they dropped me off near the YMCA and I saw the YMCA sign, I was really, really hopeful. Finally, something that I had planned is coming to fruition. But when I got near, it was dark, and then I realized it was under construction. At this point, I sat near the edges in the bushes, and I was frustrated. I started questioning my decision of staying in the United States. I could have been in Zambia by now, but I decided to stay. I was frustrated at myself. I was angry, and before I knew it, I fell asleep. Now, the next morning, I was woken up by a loud noise, and I gathered my bags and decided to leave. At that point, I scared the construction workers. But I didn't look backwards. I just wanted to get away. And I promised myself, I will find this woman's address on foot. I'm not taking the bus this time. So I did. Ironically, even with 2 days head time, I only found her address a few minutes before 5 p.m. I guess you'd say that I was in time after all. So, 5 o'clock exactly, I knocked on the door with great expectation, but when a man opens the door, I stepped back. I was thinking, not again, Wiani, not again, you know? And then I introduced myself with an apology. But the man said, welcome, we've been waiting for you. Please come on in. And without thinking, I stepped into the house. And you might be asking me, who just goes into a stranger's house? I'll tell you, it's a guy who slept outside for 2 days, okay? But also, it's from the values that my parents had taught me. Growing up in Zambia, we had strangers in my house all the time, people we barely knew, okay? So for me, this was not strange. Once in the house, the man leaves to go to another room and comes back with the strange woman I'd met at Wagner College months ago. And she introduces him as the husband, and they look genuinely happy to see me. Before long, a young man about my age comes over, and she introduces him as the cousin and the person I'll be staying with. Now, after that, we had dinner, but frankly, I wasn't paying attention to the conversation. My mind was really focused on the food that was presented in front of me. It's been 20 years since that cultural orientation at Wagner College and subsequent summer upstate New York. If I hadn't worked with folks with special needs, I wouldn't have a job that I'm doing now at the Guild as a program manager. And I also won't forget that weekend in New York. Yes, it was important to learn the cultural lessons and respect the norms, but it's also important to learn that those norms should not be taken into extreme. Yes, Americans like to look in the eye. Yes, Americans like to do small talk, And yes, Americans generally want to be on time, but not if it's going to put you at risk. I could have called her, but I wanted to be on time.
I come from Cameroon, and I moved to the United States some years back with my children. And for some time, we lived with family, and I'd been looking forward to a time when we'll have our own place. And it turned out that God gave us a nice place in a nice neighborhood, and we moved in. I was always looking forward to the day my landlord will be able to introduce us to our neighbors, because it turned out that he lives downstairs and we live upstairs with another tenant. And I was hoping that, we'll be introduced to each other, but that never happened. And it took me back to memories home when, anytime you moved into a new neighborhood, your neighbors come around to say welcome and show all the warmth, so you can feel comfortable just moving in. But that didn't happen. I knew my neighbor always looked at us through the window. When we came in and when we're going out, I would see her through the window, but I'd never met her in person. And it so turned out that, the first time I met her was under very bizarre circumstances. We had taken out the trash, and my sons had taken out the trash, and I realized that I had some trash in the house. I wanted to take it out. So I took it out, and all the bags were orange in color, sorry. And I didn't know which one was mine. So I quickly went to the one I could easily untie, and I put in the trash. And I was walking upstairs into the house, and I saw this lady standing up there in the landing. She looked between late 50s and early 60s, kind of gray, a little bit short, very serious face. And I was like, this must surely be my neighbor, because she was actually in her pajamas. And as I was walking up the stairs to meet her, she talked to me very sternly. Why did you put your trash in my trash? That took me a little bit aback, because I was looking forward to meeting her, introducing myself, and all of that. And I was like, my trash in your trash? And she said, I saw you through the window. You put your trash in my trash. And I said, I am sorry about it. It was nothing. It's just vegetables that I realized were getting bad in my refrigerator. And I took advantage of the fact that trash was still outside to put it in. Nothing bad. And she apologized and said, I'm sorry, I'm not a bad neighbor. It's just that the previous tenants opposite me, we didn't come along. And we chatted a little bit, and we parted ways. As time went on, I discovered she lived alone. And so I told my boys, my sons, that anytime we are taking out the recycling barrel outside, because they're quite huge and heavy, and anytime they found hers out there, when they're bringing us in, they should bring hers in as well. And my sons were doing that. And they also took upon themselves, every time they realized she had a heavy meal on the porch of our landlord, they'll bring it up, for her. And so one day I heard a knock on my door, and when I opened the door, she was standing right there with a card and a pack of chocolate. And she told me, I just want to say thank you for your sons. They really have been helpful to me, and she told me the things they've been doing. And, from then, we had a very cordial relationship. Once in a while, we meet, at the parking lot, and we say hello, we exchange our nices. And that was it. I also found out that she had a cat. And so one day, as I was coming up, she came out and she was crying. And she told me her child just died. I was a little bit confused. Then she said her cat. And that she came home from Canada and there was nobody to welcome her, and she was really sad. And I hugged her and comforted her. And we chatted a little bit. And again, when COVID set in, we all know how things became. And I always see her through the window as usual. But on this day, she stepped out again when she realized I was coming up. And she told me, she asked how I was faring with my kids, that she sees us going in and out, and hoped we're taking good care of ourselves. I said we're doing the best we could. And she told me she was very lonely. And I told her everybody is. I just go to work and back. And 2 weeks later, I didn't see her car parked, so I thought she traveled. And a couple of weeks passed, and my landlord told me she was gone and that she died because she was depressed, and actually that she took her life. I was so sad, and I felt so guilty because I thought to myself, could I have done better? Was I supposed to have been reaching out to her, knocking at her door, giving her a chance to communicate, to have some conversation? Was I beginning to lose the warmth I came to the United States with? Am I beginning to forget my culture? What was it I didn't do? Maybe if I'd done a little bit more, this lady would still be alive. And because of that, I told myself last Christmas, I bought a card for both my neighbors and packs of chocolate, and I put them at their doors. That was, in my mind, my way of reaching out to them. Unfortunately, nobody got back to me to say they got it. I felt really bad about that, but I told myself I'll keep doing it. A couple of weeks ago, my son, who was in Cameroon, just joined us. And after being with us a couple of days, he had looked through the window and he had asked me who the neighbors adjacent to us were. And I told him I didn't know them. And he asked me about the ones opposite us, and I said I didn't know them. And he had said, Mommy, is this how you live out here? And I said, son, welcome to America. This is America for you. But I told him that hopefully after this pandemic, we are going to reach out to them together. Hopefully, we'll make a difference.
As a little girl in Uganda, I always desired to live in the United States because of the ethnic diversity, the technological advancement, and all those good things in the United States. I remember watching The Apprentice, the Donald Trump show, where participants were required to sell products and raise money for charity. All that ignited the entrepreneurship skills in me and the desire to know and learn more about how businesses start and flourish. And eventually, I worked for a corporation in Uganda. But what's most exciting is I used to tell my mother and my sisters and some of my friends that I'd one day live in the United States, and they didn't believe me at all. It was not later when I turned 27 and I told them I was moving to the United States. My mother was in shock. She couldn't believe it. The only thing she had to do for me was to bless my new journey and my new dream. 27 years old, I traveled to the United States with, I remember, $500 on me, with that whole dream of making it happen in my life in the United States. And lucky enough, the lady that I lived with helped me stay with her without paying rent for a couple of months as I hold on to finding footage and standing on my own. And then I remember after a couple of months, as I was trying to browse through the internet, I landed on this health sector job, you know, and I was told the health sector was very booming and it was favorable for the immigrants. So I definitely had to get that job. So I remember I called into the office and then I was asked to come in person and fill in an application form. I was very excited. And then when I reached there, the office, after filling in the application form, only to be shocked and directed to the boardroom. Oh my God, the apprentice came into play at this point. 14 participants, and I was among them, and I wasn't ready at that point. I knew they would give me a couple of days to prepare for an interview. So everyone in the building was very anxious and nervous, and I couldn't afford that because I badly needed that job. So I had to compose myself, think of all the good things, and I had to make sure this was a do-or-die opportunity. So lucky enough, I was among the best chosen 5, and I was offered the opportunity. You should have seen the smile on my face. I was so excited. I'm like, this is going to work, and I thank God for everything. So in as much as the the being hired was an easy shot, but now the hurdle was the transportation. How would I get to and fro my workstation? But I still didn't lose hope because I knew where there's a will, there will always be a way. So after a couple of days, we were invited for an orientation. I was super excited, and I even forgot to pay attention to the nitty-gritties of where the orientation was going to be. I just assumed, like back home, usually it's at the head office. So I laid it low. Not later on, I realized, after rereading the invitation, that it was in Shrewsbury. Oh my God. Shrewsbury. I had no idea of where Shrewsbury was. So I quickly looked it around on the Uber application, and only to find it was very expensive to get there. Extremely expensive, and I couldn't afford it. And the best thing to do was opt for a train. I'd never been on a train before. Back home we have the train transportation, but it's mainly for cargo, not for passengers. But I was determined to make this work because this was a golden opportunity for me. So I quickly drew up a plan of how I was going to get to the North Station and to Worcester, and then later on an Uber to Shrewsbury for my orientation. I remember I was handed over a map, a very humongous map, very intriguing to learn, but at that point, I couldn't comprehend it. But at the same time, I needed to get this job. I needed to get to my destination. So I connected through the South Station to Worcester, and then got to Worcester at 10 a.m., 2 hours late for my orientation. You can imagine what I felt. But I had a lot of faith that this was my opportunity. I remember reflecting upon my favorite verse in the Bible, that's Isaiah chapter 41, verses 10, where the Lord promises us strength no matter the situation. That honestly kept me going throughout the whole journey. So I reached Shrewsbury, get to the training room, very confused, very disoriented, but at the same time, this was a golden opportunity that I had to get, no matter the situation. So I quickly introduced myself, even before I was asked to, only to break the ice and make everyone else comfortable. And I remember in that moment, this beautiful lady, one of the prospect employees, welcomed me to sit next to her, and I felt so comforted. And the orientation had to go on. And then I remember break time, I had to make sure I introduced myself to the rest of the team to just feel at home and forget about the hassle that I'd gone through. And the only difference was most of the people that I shared with had struggles with the traffic jam, and my struggle was the train station and getting to the orientation venue. So, but eventually, that beautiful lady who welcomed me was very shocked about how I could use the train to Shrewsbury. Then she eventually asked me where I lived. I told her I lived in Draycott. I remember her exclaiming that is where I live. And at that moment, I felt so relieved. I felt so grateful to her. She offered me transportation for the rest of the days of the orientation. Along the way, we learned a lot from each other, the cultural differences and all those. It was a very meaningful connection for both of us, which I still treasure up to now. 3 months down the road, I get my own car, I remember. And I was like, this is it. Only to realize that the hassle that I'd gone through at the North Station was actually the one that happens on the road. The Massachusetts drivers are so fast. It kept on reminding me about what I'd gone through, but I had to learn quickly, and I had to fit in the shortest time possible. And I remember still, I would make sure in whatever situation or whatever environment I'm in, I had to look out for any other person who would be in a situation like mine, but they can't speak up. And what helped me to speak up is my cultural background, where we're open to helping each other. So I believe in teamwork, and I believe in helping each other, and together we can be better.
I counted myself very unlucky after all my efforts to find accommodation for grad school had failed. My uncle who lives in Massachusetts that was supposed to host me basically has stopped picking up my calls. Now I'm about boarding a flight from Ghana to the US without a host. This was very scary. My scholarship was just 80%. It didn't have accommodation, and I only had $200 given to me by my godmother. So arriving in the US means that if I don't find a place, I could end up being homeless. And this was not something I was willing to do. But I had no choice. I wanted to take this opportunity. Coming to grad school meant a lot to me. A benevolent arrangement had put me in contact with a family in Massachusetts. Initially, that person wasn't sure where that family lived. But lo and behold, I was lucky. They lived in Waltham. Brandeis was in Waltham. It was just a perfect pair. I arrived at the South Station terminals and was met by these two elderly women. You don't want to believe it. They were twins. And the most difficult part of it was that they were identical, very, very identical. It was hard to tell one from the other, for a first time, of course. I sat in their car, they walked towards me, they were smiling, and I thought I had won a jackpot because I was standing there alone. I was wondering who was picking me up. So then I sat in their car, and they had music. It was Pentecostal music. So I noticed another thing, that they were very strong Pentecostal, so strong Christians. For me, this was going to be the first time living with people of different faith. I'd lived with families or immediate families who were of different backgrounds in terms of faith, but living closely with people of different faith. So this was a new experience to me. But I also found out that it was a new experience for the ladies as well. We arrived at their home. They showed me where I was going to live, and it didn't come with any condition. It was a huge rescue for me. You don't want to believe it, because I needed this. I didn't have the money for the accommodation. I also wanted to make myself very important in their home. So I painted their 3-bedroom house. I changed the kitchen faucet. I changed the tiles. I became a jack of all trades, but of course a master of none. And this strengthened the relationship that we had, because they were long yearning for that male presence in their home who could handle some of these little handy jobs in the house. And I think that fostered that relationship from the get-go. The eldest of the twins sells African foods from home and at church. She uses the back of her minivan to do this selling. And typically, most of the time, she'll come home and be like, it was so hectic after a church service, because she has a 30-minute window to do this selling. And it had a lot of people who wanted to buy at the same time and then leave for home. When I heard this, I got struck, and I was like, okay, what can I do to help? So one Sunday morning, I decided to follow her to church. This was going to be my first time in a church. I dressed up, and then I followed her to the church premises. On our way driving, I was wondering if it was the right decision, because I was very nervous. I wasn't sure what the religious practices were. I wasn't sure how things were going to go, what was expected of me. What did I have to do in order to blend in? So I was nervous about the decision. We sat in a car, driving from Waltham to Brighton, where the church is located. For me, it was a long drive. It was as if we were never getting to our destination. Once we arrived and we stepped inside the church, my feet felt very heavy. It was as if I had run a 10,000-meter race. I was not sure what was, because she did not explain to me what was going to happen. So I took a seat in the back and just observing. It was amazing, because looking at what was going on, of course, I saw people come in, and they were well-dressed. I could probably tell they were wearing their best robes, the nicest of shoes, bags. So sitting down and observing for me was very important. After 15 minutes, the lead pastor came up and the praise and worship started. The large musical instruments, it pierced my ears. It was so loud. I was getting used to this in the first time because it was just, I could hear the backup singers, the lead singers. It was just loud, but I had to find a way to contain myself. I didn't want to put my 2 fingers in my ears like a child. After a while, the pastor took the mic and said, first-time visitors should stand up and introduce themselves. This was like, for me, this was going to be a difficult moment because I was asking myself, I'm Mustafa. By my Afro-identity name, Afro-Arabic identity, it's basically, yes, I'm a Muslim, and it was obvious by my name. Then once I stood up and mentioned my first name, the whole church turned around to look at me. It was as if the earth had opened up and I was about to be swallowed. As I introduced myself, what went through my mind, I was wondering if any of my ancestors were in this building watching me and wondering, what is this gentleman doing? I was also wondering if there was anyone within the audience that knew me that would probably call my family and say, hey, your boy has changed his religion. I only came here to help her out. But I couldn't, of course, shout that out. The church service went on for a while, and I think that once we closed, we did that a few times, and I got comfortable. I got to know people. The relationship grew more stronger. I got to connect with a lot of folks. One Sunday, we had just returned from the church, and we're home. A young man came by. He wanted to buy a few things. He bought his items, and he thought it was his place. He had seen me at the church a few times, so he thought it was his place to probably convert me because he had knowledge that I was a Muslim. So we started an argument about religion and development in Ghana. In the course of the argument, his hand hit a Bible which was on the table, and I was sitting close to the table, so I dived at full length to catch the Bible before it hits the ground. I put it back on the table, and I was about to renew our argument. But suddenly I noticed his interest in the argument had just fallen short. He was no longer interested to continue. Myself, the ladies, and a young man sat, and there was a moment of silence. They were worried why I had dived so hard to the point of injuring myself just to catch a Bible. And for me, it was not just a Bible. It was the respect for a holy book. I wouldn't want the Quran to be put on the floor, and it's the same way I wouldn't want to see the Bible being put on the floor. And that was the gesture that, for me, was in mind. But you know what it did? I think that in that moment of silence, it taught us a lot of things about our faith. We got to learn, the ladies got to learn, the gentleman got to learn, and I also got to learn that it's important we show respect. We do not have to attend or have to have the same faith, but the most important thing is that we can coexist. We can get to share religious values within the same moment. And I think that this opened up another door of learning for the ladies and myself. The ladies kept good times of my salat, my 5 daily prayers, and they would usually sometimes call or remind me when it's time. During Ramadan, they would go above and beyond, buy groceries just for me and just to share with me. And there were times when they would fast a few days alongside. And it was beautiful. And each time following them to church, I think that it expanded my understanding of Christianity, Pentecostalism, but also it gave them opportunity to learn something from me. And in the long run, I believe that we build a community of interfaith, where we get to share values, be it Christmas, be it religious festivities, Christian religious festivities. And these were times that we all celebrated at the same time in the house. And I think that in the long run, what it did also was that it gave us that chance to share common values and learn from each other. And we had more progressive discourse over time about religion and growth in general.